What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're still working on the Porsche 924S. We are 3 weeks to the day away from Alpine Volks Fair in Helen, Georgia, which is basically my deadline for this car. We are putting in a rear sway bar. Now, this particular 924S did not come with a rear sway bar. It came with a front sway bar, but luckily for me, the rear torsion tube has mounts for a rear sway bar. As you can see here, there's a mount here and here on the passenger side. Axles are in, which I just put in. They steer clear of the dual bellow bags. We'll get those in before the end of this episode so you guys can see everything all together. So on this end link, this is the driver's side end link. You can see on the inside of the lower stud, it has the 22 mil cam bolt on it. And that mounts right here on the spring plate. And on the outside, as you can see, there's just a recess for it off the trailing arm with a bolt and a nut, and that is adjustable. You basically loosen this nut up, and as that cam bolt turns, it basically can adjust the spring plate in different locations. If you were doing this for the first time in your car, you were taking the rear end of the car apart for the first time in your ownership, I would recommend taking a Sharpie and marking this. That way, when you take it all apart, when you put that new cam bolt in for the lower end link of the sway bar, you can rotate that to get it into its same position so you don't really throw it way out of alignment. All right, well, the rear sway bar is in. So what I'm gonna do now is I'll put the rear airbags in, put the wheels on, and set the car down on blocks. Make sure that that sway bar still allows the rear end the range of motion it needs to get to the aired out height that I want it at. And we're gonna pull measurements on the front because I need to start taking the front wheels apart to start refinishing them. I think this 1/2 inch lip is a little too crusty, but luckily I've got another one that's in good shape. And I think this other one here is a keeper as well. So going to pull some measurements and see what I'm going to need for spacers. I'm going to need a little bit of a spacer anyway to get away from the airbag in the front. So what I'm doing now is I'm just taking some measurements. I've got about 10 mil of spacing on it right now. And I think I need another 15 mil to bring it to about similar fitment to the rear. So I'm going to take a few more measurements, we'll figure that out, and we'll get some spacers ordered. I've got a pair of the 1/2 inch lips that'll polish out nice, that don't have a lot of curb rash. Kayla is disassembling the wheels.
There's so much silicone on them, you have to almost like spin them to eat the silicone off.
All right, so I've been fighting with specs and hardware and what I'm going to do for the wheels. This has been over the course of the last few days, and this episode is kind of basically a accumulation of those last few days and probably the next couple. So with the rear, I originally test fit with some roached out 2.5 inch lips, and I loved the look. We had a 16 by 10. I'm kind of deciding to use some 2-inch lips we have here. These originally came on Kayla's RSs that now have all brand new lips all around on her 944, and with some spacing, I've been able to figure out where I want it. I'm still sitting about flush with the fender. I really like the look. This is more of a slant lip than it is a step lip, like those 2.5 inch ones are. The main issue I was running into, and some of you Porsche guys or wheel spec guys might appreciate the nerd level we're about to dive into. The rear studs are pretty short, and I can't space the wheel out as much as I'd really like to and keep safe thread engagement. But I only need to come out about 10 to 15 mil to where I really want it. It's not until about 20 millimeter spacers that you see have their own studs. Anything smaller than that, I can't find anything that come with their own studs pressed in because they're a little too thin. So that being said, Elliot from 944 Barn basically told me I had longer studs here because I called him and asked him what was involved in doing longer studs on these rear ends with the aluminum arms, whether or not the hubs had to be pressed out of the actual trailing arm. If that was the case, I don't have a press set up here in the shop yet, so I was going to try to avoid taking all of that stuff apart to get new studs in. So it turns out the early steel arms have longer studs because these early track width steel trailing arms on the 944s and the 924s came with factory free floating spacers. These are about 21 millimeter thick. So these from the factory came on the trailing arms and left enough stud even once the spacers are on. So with the spacers off, we have ourselves some long studs. So I took this one apart last night, took everything apart, took all the e-brake shoes out, all the springs, all the hardware, the adjuster, took everything out to see if I could get enough space in there to get one of them free. And as you can see here, I hammered one out and it just won't make it. At the bottom where the e-brake cable comes in is where you get the most space, and it's still just a little too tight. So that being said, and I know that's a long-winded talking head segment, but using the factory stud lengths and keeping a safe thread engagement, basically between 12 and 14 millimeters of thread engagement, because we've got a 14 millimeter stud. So usually rule of thumb is you want the same amount of thread engagement as the diameter of your stud. A lot of people could say differently, but that's usually the general rule of thumb that I've heard. Running a 7 millimeter spacer, I can get this fitment, which I am really happy with. Basically, it's flush with the car. It's as math as it can get. And I still have 14 millimeters of thread engagement. Also got the fronts apart. I've got some bolts in just for test fitting purposes right now. Same with the rear. I'm gonna use my 1/2-inch lips, the original 1/2-inch lips. I still like the idea of a 2-inch lip in the rear and a 1/2-inch lip up front with the exaggerated face look and dish look in the back. What I've done is I've ordered a 25 millimeter spacer, which has its own studs. And that is going to basically get me right out to the same fitment as the rear of the car. But we've got basically 16 by 8, 16 by 9.5, and I'll be running a studded 25 mil spacer up front and a floating 7 mil spacer in the rear with safe thread engagement in the back. All right, guys, I've been working on polishing the lips, and worst case scenario is always when you're about to refinish lips if all 4 of your lips are covered in clear coat. So that was the case on these, the 2-inch in the rear and the 1/2-inch lips up front. Had a clear coat over them, and you know when you put like a metal polish to it and you're just praying that it turns black, knowing that it's raw aluminum, and they didn't turn black, and you could kind of see some chips in the clear coat, and it's like, oh boy. So for the last literal day, basically, because I multitask with the laser work and whatnot, I've been using aircraft stripper coat after coat after coat to try to strip this clear coat off these lips. And for any of you guys who do this more often than I do, the aircraft stripper is not what it used to be. This stuff works so much worse than it used to. Normally, one coat, heavy brushed on coat of this stuff, and it would pull it right off. So I've got 2 out of the 4 looking real good, and I'll show you guys what we're looking at right now. All right, so this is the one I'm working on. Just about done scraping most of the clear off. And this one you can see is still lifting. I still have to go around this with the scraper and try to get the rest of it off and then wash it. This is just too time consuming. I mean, any of you guys that do this that don't have a tank to chem strip them in, it's just super, super annoying and time consuming. And I got more stuff on this car to do than this. So this is a crucial aspect. I decided I'm gonna do my best with the lips I have rather than spend all the money on new lips and then ship time, because shipping time is getting real tight. We're 2 weeks away from when we leave for Helen, Georgia, and it is just getting tight. I haven't been filming any of it because I am multitasking, so it's really tough to kind of just settle in and do one thing and film it. So this is where I'm at right now. This is coming out pretty good. It's coming out pretty good. I think I'll do a 1500 and then a 2000 grit and then polish it out. But there's still a little bit of clear around the bolt menu that I need to get out. So that's where we're at on the lips right now. Not doing the best job documenting it, but it's kind of crunch time. Parts are coming in though, and we'll unbox some stuff here shortly. But we got some parts coming in. These are spacers, front and rear. And then management should be in tomorrow. And then we're right into another episode of pulling the car apart, wiring the management, plumbing airlines, and building the management in the spare tire well. So for now, I'm focusing on the lips. Hopefully by the end of this episode, we get some wheels getting ready to be put back together, except for one component. And that is one of my barrels has a massive crack in it. This guy right here. I forgot all about that crack in that barrel. So what happened was when I bought these wheels from Elliott at 944 Barn, I'm pretty sure I noticed the crack. That one's pretty hard to miss. This here is almost like a daily vlog video where you guys are seeing the problems I'm having and the checklist that remains on the 924S for Alpine Volks Fair Prep in Helen, Georgia. So it's the next day and I did not film anything of getting these wheels stripped, sanded, and polished. It was a full day yesterday working on these things, and filming it was the last thing I wanted to do because it was just taking far too long. But this is an incredible state of change for what they started as, basically like this. And the clear coat just did not want to strip. Now, this is close enough. I'm happy with this. There's still some blemishes, but it's the crack in this barrel that we talked about earlier. And Elliott just so happens to be in Hawaii for the next 2 weeks. He basically arrives home just before Helen, Georgia, because we'll see him there too. We're holding a 944 meet there. So he is 2.5 hours from here and has a barrel, but he won't be home in time to ship it to me to when I need these wheels built. I just ordered tires last night. So I have to drive to Elliott's to get a barrel because I don't have a TIG welder here in the shop yet and can't weld that up. But on top of a weld repair, there's a big flat spot in that barrel. So even if I were to weld that up and fix the actual crack, there's a flat spot in that barrel and I am just horrified to see what that would look like on a balancer. So between now and the end of the weekend, in the next few days basically, I need to get out to Elliott's just to get a barrel. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put some bolts in these to basically hold them together for the weight of the car, and we're going to test fit because the spacers came in last night. But we've got front spacers and we've got rear spacers, and we'll be able to get everything mounted on the car, make sure we've got good thread engagement, make sure all the specs are right. Well, shoot. Oh, I think it's hitting on the inside bevel right there. This is a little bit longer than this is deep. And it's hitting right on that last bevel just a little bit. Well, again, if I had a lathe, I'd chuck it up in the lathe and just mill a little bit more off that shoulder in there to get it on. But since I don't, we're going to do it by hand. So that's both spacers done, and luckily it's just at the end there where the bevel is, so it doesn't take away from the hub centric aspect of the spacer. It still fits enough on the hub with the turned hub bore of the actual spacer. So we haven't messed with the hub centric aspect of it at all, and now it'll fit on all the way. So the rears are already on. We'll get the fronts on, torque down, and we'll test fit some wheels. All right, guys, this is it. And this is exactly what I was hoping for. And we did indeed get continuity with the fitment from front to rear. This is fender to lip. When you look at 12 o'clock on the wheel to the fender arch, we are fender to lip, flush, front and rear. Just test fitting the wheels make this whole thing look so much better now that the lips are stripped, sanded, and polished. Just about an hour ago, management showed up from Bag Riders, so we've got everything we need now for air suspension. So the next episode, we'll be tearing the interior out and wiring the car, plumbing the car. Absolutely cannot wait to see this thing down and on the ground, off the lift, under its own power, suspension-wise, on tires. I'm so excited. Be sure to hit ludwigsgarage.com. I still have some merch left from the Champion hoodies, t-shirts, and windbreakers, some of the hats, shop banners. So make sure you hit the link in the video's description below. If you want to help support the channel and the builds and the shop overall in a bigger way, the Patreon link is also in the video's description below. Again, I want to give a huge thanks to Bag Riders for sponsoring this video and this project. Super excited to be doing another project with them. Thank you guys so much for watching and all of your support. I'll see you guys in the next episode.